Hello, welcome everyone to Connections, the sports media podcast. I'm Cody. You can follow me on Twitter at Cody_CHGO. You might know me from the CHGO Cubs podcast. And I'm with my good friend, old friend, not to call you old, Steve, but
I'm old, it's
a
fine.
longtime friend, my good friend, Steve Mork.
Hey.
And I just tweeted out like a thread today about like what this is. Me and Steve have really only been the people who've been talking about this. So basically to introduce everyone to what the heck this is, me and Steve both work in media. I work for CHGO, which is a sports media company, and Steve works for Illinois Public Media.
Yeah, that's
down
right.
in Champaign.
And
yeah, so like we both went to college together. We both have been in this industry for a while, right? Like
I've thought about it a couple times. It's been, if you want to count college experience, which I do, it's been since 2009. So that is 13 years. It'll be 14 years next year, which is insane to think of. When I first got asked, hey, do you want to do radio? And I said, why? And they're like, you have a good radio voice.
Uh-huh.
Are you calling me ugly? Like, do I not look good on TV? Like, what is this? But it's worked out so far.
Yeah. No, funny enough, for me, I thought when I went to college, I always thought that I was going to be like a reporter, but like via writing or so, like basically like, I always just thought of journalists like as a teenager or, as a young adult, I thought, journalist, writer, reports on whatever's happening via newspaper or something like that, honestly. And it turns out like, technology advanced and you can do this in many different ways.
Yeah, you really can. I mean, I didn't even think I was going to be in media when I went to college. I was originally a bio major. I'd always liked sports and liked media stuff, like the way it worked and everything, but I was never thought it could be a career. And I wanted to work at a zoo. I wanted to work with lions and tigers at a zoo in San Diego when I went to school first, and it didn't work out because it just doesn't work out sometimes for people in college for their first major. Everyone changes majors at least once, I feel like now. I changed to broadcasting and jumped right in. That was a great part about our alma mater's Eastern Illinois University. Shout out to EIU. It's the Yale of the Midwest, or Harvard of the Midwest. You call it the Harvard of the Midwest.
I call it the Harvard of the Midwest.
Don't want to discount EIU, but it's a great broadcasting school. It's underrated. It's a gem down here in East Central Illinois. And I talk to students almost every day here because I work at U of I. So Illinois Public Media is the NPR and PBS member station for East Central, or for Champaign-Urbana. Our broadcast license is on the University of Illinois. It's held by the Board of Trustees. It's a lot of FCC mumbo jumbo, but I work with students a lot. And a lot of them are like, how did you get into broadcasting? I tell them my story, and they're like, well, how do you get to where you are? It's like experience. It's all about experience. And any experience is good experience. But now I didn't get paid for a lot of my experience. So I always tell them to get paid for what you do, always.
Yeah. So I don't want to jump into everything right away. I kind of want to, we're going to probably do this for about an hour tops. But today's show is just kind of like an introductory, like Steve just kind of gave you a little bit about him and, his journey. I'm going to talk about mine, and I think we're going to end the show with some major Chicago sports media news that has been out for a couple weeks now. So we'll end the show that way. That's a little tease, so stick around. I see my guy Shane, who's always in the CHGO Cubs Podcast YouTube chat here. He also tunes in on YouTube when I stream playing Call of Duty. So shout out to you, Shane. Basically this podcast, if you're listening to it, you might be listening to it on the old Twitter account of the Skies Falling Podcast, which is the first podcast I ever started with an old buddy of mine, Tommy Long. Shout out to you, man. we're live on that Twitter account right now. It's just connections_pod. We're live on my YouTube account. It's just my name, or I guess there's handles on YouTube now, so it's just
those are new.
Yeah, shout out to YouTube for finally doing that. I've been waiting for that forever. Which is just Cody_CHGO, and then we're also live on my Facebook. Please, weird people on my Facebook, please do not leave me comments. I understand this is weird to you. Like, everyone there on my Facebook is old. It doesn't understand what the hell this is.
It's weird. Like, Facebook's almost old media now.
Yeah, like I know that
shout out
people. If anyone watching on Facebook right now that's not my mom, like, they're like, "What is this?" I'm almost convinced that that's what it is. So, but yeah, like, I kind of started saying, I wanted to do something like this, like, during the baseball off season, because in my, it's been about 8.5, 9 months since I've been working at CHGO. I've got to hear stories about people who are so much more successful than me in this industry, and like how they got started. And like, it's a wild ride, man. Like, there is no easy path. And like, I know me and Steve know that for sure. You know what I mean? So like, to me, like, hearing these stories is something that I'm very interested in. And that's kind of what the point of this is. If it turns into something really big, cool. But to me, I'm just doing this for fun during the baseball off season. And being able to do it with Steve was just kind of like the icing on the top, because then it gets me to, or allows me to talk to him more. And then two, he works in the industry too. And like, honestly, like, a lot of my friends outside of people I actually work with, none of them are in this industry. So it's fun to be able to talk about these types of things with someone who understands and is like reading about this stuff all the time too. And understands just how hard it is to get started in this field. So, that's the basis of why we're doing this. All right.
And I don't think we'll hit on like the weird rumor mill stuff too, of like who's beefing with who, because everyone's beefing with everybody at some point in time in media.
But if it's a juicy one, Steve, I think
if it's real juicy, we could talk about it. But like, there's always something going on in media. I mean, it's a very competitive market. It's a very competitive job. There's only so many. I mean, if you look just in Chicago, just in sports, we'll stick to that for right now. There's 2 major sports stations in the city. I mean, which is still, for Chicago, that's a lot. Some cities don't have any. And if they do, there's just one. Like, Boston has, I think, 1 or 2. New York has 1 or 2, but there's not that many sports stations out there. So there's not that many sports jobs. And most the time, there's only 2 hosts at most. Sometimes some shows do 3. I haven't seen a 4 show since like the Dan Labitard show, but even then, they're not all hosts. They're a bunch of producers and everything like that. So it's hard to find these jobs, to find any job. And I should say terrestrial sports stations. There's plenty of opportunities now in CHGO and The Athletic and many other ways to work online now. And there's a ton of podcasts. I'm a White Sox fan. Shout out to the 05 White Sox right behind me.
Shout out to the 2016 Cubs behind me.
Yeah, whatever. But there's plenty of those guys. The White Sox podcast, Sox Machine, is great. The 108 guys are hilarious. And I could go on and on and on and on and on.
CHGO Cubs, or the
CHGO
White
guys
Sox
are great too.
podcast. Yeah.
Sean and Herb, they're great. I mean, there's so many ways to break into the industry now, more than ever. And I think a lot of that has to do with the evolving technology. A lot of that has to do with really the pandemic, because it forced people to think outside the box. They weren't thinking as like, oh, I have to go work at the Score. Oh, I have to go work at ESPN. Oh, I have to go work at the Tribune or the Sun Times or the Daily Herald. Now you can write anywhere. I was writing for a little bit for a website that I can't remember what it was called, but it was for free and it was on the White Sox. We were supposed to write something once a week, and it just didn't work out. And that happens all the time. Yeah. But
if you ain't doing things for free in this field, you ain't gonna make it.
Which sucks, which really sucks, because you don't want to waste your time.
Right.
And you don't want to be taken advantage of either.
Right.
I've worked 2 jobs. more in my career than I'd ever have. When I first started in radio, I was working in commercial radio in Charleston, Mattoon at Cromwell Radio Group, 104.3 The Party, 101.3 WMCI. There was 3 radio stations. That's where I got my start, part-time, working nights, weekends, holidays, overnights, every shift that no one else wanted. But I also made myself available for that. I think it was Vic Fangio that said your best ability is availability, or something. Someone bad Bears coach. Well, Vic Fangio wasn't a bad Bears coach. There was a bad Bears coach that said that once, I think, and it's not wrong. It's not wrong. There was some times where I'd get off my full-time job at working Home Depot until 2:30 in the afternoon and just go to the station to hang out. My guy Curtis Allen would probably get annoyed with me just sitting there sometimes talking and getting in the way. But at the same time, a lot of times something came up and they're like, hey, we need another hand. Can you go record this promo so I can stay on air? Can you go take care of something? Can you run this board while I go record this client? There's always something going on at a radio station. And you really, if you're around, you're valuable. And that's what really got me to the job at U of I, at WILL. It was being available and being a jack of all trades. That's kind of, I tell people sometimes when I first started, I was doing everything no one else wanted to do. So it was a lot of promo editing, which I still do. A lot of like recording client or recording guests. It's public radio, so they're not clients. It's different. It's different. But it's a lot of recording people that somebody else didn't want to record. So I go record it and go edit it and do that kind of stuff. But that's what you got to do. You got to do you got to be able to want to do the things that people don't want to do, because if you're doing it, you're valuable in that situation.
Right. So you kind of talked about how, you got into radio even a little bit before college. So I kind of want to start with like the journey, and I can meet you till the end of college and then hand it back over to you and go from there. And so for me, like when I was in high school, I didn't think I was going to even go to college, man. Like
Same for a little bit.
I was like, I grew up with a single mom, a brother, and like my dad lived in Tennessee for most of my childhood. And then like, like I just nothing against my mom. My mom did a great job raising me and making me into a decent person, but there's no doubt that I just did not have the drive or the like guidance on just figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. My mom was all about
I get that.
My mom was all about just like graduate high school and then go get a job. Like, and as a single parent with 2 kids, I don't blame her for having that mentality in a way. So, Mom, if you're watching, please do not get offended. But because of that, slowed my process of just getting to where I am now. Right. And, I graduated high school, didn't know what I wanted to do. Graduated high school, May of 2009. And I'm working at a Kroger down in Decatur, Illinois, and I'm stocking shelves. And I'm doing that part-time. And then eventually I start doing it full-time because I'm just like, well, they're paying me money. And I'm like, whatever. And I still don't really know what I want to do in my life. I was actually, it got to a point where I thought that working there was just what I was going to do for my life, because they were paying me money and I eventually was making enough money to move out, and I got my own apartment and I was living alone. And, I was like an adult, like a full on adult, but I was like 18 years old. Like when I think back to it, I'm like, man, I can't believe I made it through that, because I was so different compared to what I am now. I'm like, and it's so wild to me.
It's always weird going back and thinking about that
right.
kind of stuff. I worked at a grocery store too when I was in high school.
Nice. It sucks, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a character builder. My one of my mild takes, because it's not really a hot take, everyone should be required, like it should be a national standard, to work in either food service, retail, or retail for like a year, and have to work a holiday.
Yeah,
have to, because Black Friday in retail is insane. It is the worst of the worst. The day before Thanksgiving at grocery stores is like Black Friday on steroids because people are buying things they actually need for Thanksgiving and just normal grocery shopping. Everyone should do it. It's a character growth. And you can always tell the people that have never worked retail, never worked food service, never worked grocery when they go to those places. They're rude, usually rude. Anyway, continue on your journey. My tangent, there'll be more of that. Don't worry.
Yeah, you're fine. I'm sure we'll have many more rabbit holes down the road. Shout out to my good friend Josh Bryan in the chat too. Also EIU alum. Says Kroger, home of the baddies, which I'll let him believe that. I'll
man.
Whatever. Hey, whatever. So anyway, I'm doing this job. I'm living on my own, and I'm again no real guidance. I guess. I think I was just happy to get out of the house, of my parents' house, because it's not like I had the greatest, time as a kid, and I don't know. It's all a very confusing time, in my opinion, when I think back to it now. And but I did that job for about 2 years, and finally, I think in the last 8 months before I was finally done with that job, I realized that this job sucks. And lucky for me, during that entire time, I was taking online courses because my mom actually told me that I should do that. So I had by the time I finished, I had 30 credits. So I was able to transfer to a university with basically as a sophomore, right? Something like that. So the problem was when I had those 30 credits, they were all just gen eds basically. And still didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then something triggered in my brain one day. I think honestly, a lot of people would hate this, but I'm pretty sure I was watching First Take or something like that. And I'm listening to Stephen A. and Skip Bayless just yell at each other. And I'm like, I could do this. How do I do this? And then next thing I know, I'm on the Google machine and I'm searching how to get into journalism and media and all this stuff. And next thing I know, I'm applying to universities in Illinois to, looking at their journalism programs. And, I didn't have the greatest grades in high school because I never thought I was going to go to college. So I just, Eastern is not hard to get into as much as I say it's the Harvard of it's a great school, man. I love that place to death, but it's not hard to get into. So, I don't want to say I didn't get into other schools. I mean, I applied, I thought about Western, and then I went to Macomb and thought that place sucked. So I was like, no. Sorry, Shane, by the way. And I tried to get into Illinois State because their program looked very good, and they're the one school that told me no. And then there was Columbia here in Chicago. Honestly, I applied to that one just to see if I would even get in because it looks so prestigious.
My brother went there for a little bit,
and their program was insane.
It's insane.
And so I actually got into it and I was mind blown, but then I saw the cost and was like, hey. So
there's a couple extra zeros on that.
yeah. So I was like, okay. And I applied to Eastern because I honestly didn't really know if the program was great or bad, but I also knew I had friends that were already in Charleston going to Eastern. So I thought that would be a good way for me to at least feel comfortable moving to a new place and doing this. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it happened, where I realized that I wanted to get into the media industry was just watching ESPN. And Steve, you're only a few years older than me, but growing up as a kid, it was turning on SportsCenter when you woke up and got ready for school and you just watched it as you're getting ready, basically. And then it's the same.
Mine was the SportsCenter. It was Cold Pizza.
Or Cold Pizza, yeah.
ESPN2 Cold Pizza. That was before First Take, before it was their first shot at something different. And it was one of the I don't remember who was on it. I wish I did, but it was such a great show. I wish they would bring that show back. That was such a good show. It was Good Morning Football, before Good Morning Football. It was definitely a TV morning show that I really, really enjoyed. I was more of an ESPN2 guy. It was always Cold Pizza or Stump the Schwab.
Oh, Stump the Schwab was great.
That was a great show.
Yeah.
Baseball Tonight in its heyday was the best sports television show
Absolutely.
on TV. It was like, it was so good. I mean, that's what really catapulted me into wanting to do this thing.
Well, so I would watch SportsCenter in the morning, and it was basically just the rerun from the night before, right?
Right.
But also, like, I would do the same thing when I'd go to bed. I'd go to bed, and I would go to bed like after whatever game I was watching or whatever I was doing that day as a kid. And then when I go to bed, I would put ESPN on. And my brother, who I had to share a room with, he is the exact opposite of me. He hated sports. Like he could care less about what was going on in sports. He hated the fact that I always wanted to watch SportsCenter. So, but I was older. I just bullied bullied him, right?
You're the older brother.
So we'd go to bed, like we'd lay down and go to bed or whatever. He's in his bed, I'm in my bed, and I'm turning SportsCenter on. And I'm like, I mean, when I think back to Mondays when I was a kid, it's like, all right, Monday Night Raw and then SportsCenter right after, right? Like from 8 to 10 Monday.
Hit that one.
Right, yeah. From 8 to 10, it was Monday Night Raw and then SportsCenter after. And there was so many times when I was a kid where I'd watch SportsCenter, that first one, and then just watch it again.
Well, like the 10 o'clock SportsCenter was the first. It was the first one after all the Central Time Zone, like baseball games, because games start at 7 o'clock, and the first one is 10 o'clock. So it's got all the Central, NL Central, AL Central, AL East, NL East, all those highlights. The only highlights it doesn't have is the West, and really, who cares about either the American League or National League West, aside from Dodgers fans?
Right.
But you got everything. You need it right there, and then you watch it again and again.
Yeah.
And then eventually, I think it was probably the midnight one was the newest SportsCenter. And I mean, I didn't go to bed in high school till about 2 o'clock in the morning because what is sleep when you're a 14-year-old?
Right.
But yeah, you watch SportsCenter over and over and over and over again.
So like that was like, as a kid, I didn't realize that like this was something that I wanted to do. There was nothing at my, there was nothing in my school that like even remotely related to journalism, which I don't know if there is now in most schools, but there should be in my opinion.
There is, because it was the same thing at my high school. There was not a journalism department, or there was like a couple like creative writing classes you could take. And I'm not a writer. I am much more of a talker than a writer. Short form writing is my thing. Long form is not me. That's where we differ. But now I like see stuff from, like, there was the yearbook. You could join the yearbook. That was the one foray in journalism you get in high school. Now there's a whole like journalism department. They have a paper again. I don't know if they have an internet radio station or anything like that, but yeah, which is really cool to see it.
Yeah.
The good journalists always start in high school.
Yeah. Like. So I just feel like some of these things I've said were what set me back, because I never could figure out what I wanted to do. And if I would have just been exposed to some of this, maybe I would have figured it out earlier. I don't know. But yeah, like I that's basically how I've realized, I should look into this, was just watching ESPN. And I transferred to Eastern in fall 2012, and that was basically after I left my job at Kroger like sometime in like August 2011, and then moved back in with my mom and my stepdad, saved up money living with them for a year, and then went to Eastern in the fall 2012. And so I think I'm met up with you equally now, so we can. If you want to,
sounds about right. Yeah,
you want to take over here?
Because I was in college. I went to college in 2008. So I graduated high school in 2008, and started in fall of 2008 at Eastern. I was there for 5 years. So your junior year was my first senior year, because I was there for 5 years. Take that 5-year plan, kids. So that the victory lap where we lived in the chapter house together. That's where I was really looking for a job in radio. And in college, that's where I really did a lot of sports. I was one of the sports people at WEIU. Shout out to Jeff Owens and Hitmix. And I did Charleston. I did play-by-play. That's what I wanted in college. I wanted to be Vince Scully. I mean, I wanted to be that guy. who doesn't want to be Vin Scully?
Right.
I wanted to be Joe Buck. I wanted to be the lead play-by-play guy at a radio or at a television station. Now, I didn't do TV play-by-play because there wasn't much available. But I did do a lot of radio play-by-play. I did Charleston girls basketball. I did Eastern Illinois softball. I did Eastern baseball. I did Eastern volleyball. I did KZ Westfield football when they went to state. That was my senior year of college. That was the first time I was ever at Memorial Stadium. I was in the press box calling a high school state championship, which is one of the cool things because I covered a game again earlier this season. I covered the second game of the season. I can't remember if it was that Virginia. I think it was Virginia. Then when they beat Virginia earlier this season, when Illinois was really starting to find some steam early in the season. And then I was doing that for also a different radio station, though. It wasn't WEIU. It was WRJM. It is no longer there. There is another AM radio station in Charleston. At least there was. I think it was AM 1260, so way up the dial. And for anyone that knows, the higher the number on the AM dial, the weaker the signal is, usually. So right now I'm on AM 580 at WILL. The signal is very large. On a clear day, you can get it up in Chicagoland area, not so much in the city, just because AM stations in the city are hard to get in general, just on radio waves. But the WILL is a big kidney bean. So I think it was 1260, WRJM 1260. And that was a job. That was the first time in radio where I was definitely doing stuff way out of the job description. I thought I was there to just do play-by-play. And then I was all of a sudden board opping a Saturday morning call-in show with a local pastor. And this was right when Obamacare was getting talked about. And so he was talking about healthcare, and it was definitely someone that I did not agree with on the stands. And he was there with his son. It was very strange. For all I know is now he's like mayor of Charleston or something like that. I don't know. But that was definitely one of those first forays into broadcasting. Like, I don't like this part of it, and of getting told something that I wasn't ready for. Not necessarily, maybe not ready for, but necessarily told I was going to do up front. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot in really any job. You get hired to do something, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we also need you to do this other thing. And I, of course, did it for a little bit. It didn't work out, so I wasn't at that station anymore. And that station is no longer existing, like, at all. The towers in Charleston are gone. There was like 4. I don't know if you ever like drove on the like north of the downtown Charleston, as much as there is a downtown Charleston, like going out of the city towards 57. There was like a little, like, literally trailer. I don't even know what street it was. And there was like 4 little radio towers because there is an airport in Charleston, the Coles County Airport. So you have to keep towers. All radio towers are regulated by the FCC, by the FAA. And so they have to make sure that the planes can fly over them and all that. So there was 4 little towers that made a little small station anyway. But it was a really cool job. And it was a cool job for the most part, doing all play-by-play, doing the KZ Westwood football. That was the first foray into high school football, play-by-play. And that was all through my senior year of college. And then I continued to do play-by-play when I was working at Cromwell for Cumberland High School. It was Cumberland High School, but technically it was all of Cumberland County anyway. It was a really, really, really small school. It's essentially, I think they were 2A. They might be 1A now, which is essentially just 11 kids. Sometimes you're lucky if you get 20 on a team. So everybody's playing 2 ways. It's a very fast pace because you just kind of got to move as quick as you can and hopefully score some points or get off the field and really just flip sides. But then I got the job at WILL in 2013 or 2015 because in between college, after I graduated and before I got the job at the party, I was working for my dad. I was working construction. I was doing the Harrison Ford, working construction for a couple months before you get the big break at Star Wars. or American Graffiti. And then it's been at WILL since 2015 in various forms of jobs. I was originally a digital media associate producer. One of the hosts for All Things Considered left. I was hosting All Things Considered for 5 years. They decided to go in a direction, and no fault of my own, earlier this year. So I'm no longer hosting All Things Considered, but I am essentially the first fill-in host all the time for things. 2 weeks ago, I was filling in a morning edition every day. It's the most listened to radio morning show in the country. We don't get books for ratings a whole lot in Champaign, just because it's a small town and those are expensive.
Yeah.
But both All Things Considered and Morning Edition were number one. So when I was hosting when we last got them, when I was hosting and when I fill in, it's still, I get people telling me all the time, "Oh, I heard you on the radio again." So, yeah, thanks. I miss hosting every day. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely a skill that not everyone can do. And there are some people that think they can do it, and they just can't. Like, it's not really it's hard to explain. Sorry, it's not something you can really teach. I feel like talking into a microphone and doing all the things that you need to do to host a show. It's definitely I mean, you know this, you do it literally every day. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of, I mean, we literally just popped up and started talking, but it's a little different. But like usually most shows, there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of things you have to think about. What you're going to say, when you're going to say it, how much time do I have to say it? And especially live radio, you have a clock to follow. You have 2 minutes to say the most important thing in those 2 minutes, and then get the hell out the way, because you're going back to the national show.
This is bringing back memories of when I worked at an actual radio station. So before I get into that, I just want to commend you for sticking with it in college and doing all the things that it took to, get what you got post college. And like you said, you worked construction with your dad or whatever, and like I. Obviously, I knew you. We were friends, and you were dating one of my best friends, and all this stuff. And I don't know, but I'm going to assume it was a very like, what am I doing?
Every day.
Time, yeah,
every day,
especially after you graduated.
The thing is that never goes away. That's kind of part of it, and I mean, even. Radio doesn't pay well, people see the contracts of the guys at like the Stephen A. Smith skit at ESPN, or what's his face at Fox Sports got, or like what Al Michaels gets going to Amazon, or what Joe Buck got going from Fox to ESPN. That is top 0.001% of of the business. Most people aren't making that money.
Right. And
even people at ESPN.
Yeah. Well, they're laying people off all the time. So, I mean, but that's kind of like my thing is like when I said all this stuff about how like I didn't know what I wanted to do, and then I realized, oh, this could be something cool. And then I, came to college and just thought, okay, if I go to school for this, I'll be able to just get something. Like I figured it wouldn't be as easy as I'm explaining it, but like I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it was. And the reason I said that I commend you for everything you did in college, and then how you were able to get what you got now is when I was in college, and you can be critical of me, Steve. I don't care at this point, because I have my dream job. But when I was in college, I admit I didn't do enough, Steve. I didn't do enough.
Oh, I didn't do enough in college.
I didn't do enough. I think I did the Daily Eastern News for like a semester, And then I did the yearbook, as in like I think I went and took some pictures to put in the yearbook a couple times.
The Warbler.
And I was very like half-ass everything. I really was. And I don't know if that's because I had a lot of distractions with SAE, for example. Me and you were in an SAE. Just college lifestyle. Like,
it's college. Everything you do is a distraction.
Right. Like, I won't lie. Like, did I want to go cover something on a Thursday or Friday afternoon or an evening instead of go to the bar with my friends at 4:00 Club at Sticks? No, I did not want to do any of that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just being honest about it. And when I look back at it now, it's like, yeah, I probably should have done a little bit more. I don't know if it would have helped me get somewhere faster, but I do know it probably would have got me more connections. Because and that's why this podcast is named Connections, because like the people who go far or do well in this industry, they network like it's their job. Like, it's their job to just network in general. Like that's basically how I don't want to say that's the entire reason that I got my job at CHGO, but it helps if you know people. It helps if you know people, right?
It really does. And I kind of buck that trend a little bit just because I didn't know anybody at WILL when I first applied for the job. Mm-hmm. But trust me, it helps a ton. When we're hiring people, we're now hiring people a lot. So, hey, if you're looking for a new connection or new job, let me know. Anyone listening here, not Cody here. I know Cody's in the spot that he wants to be, but it's all about who you know and when you know they're available or when you know they have something available.
Right. So what I'm getting at is when, like I said, in college, the one thing I did do in college that I was really proud of is I got an internship at a newspaper in Ottawa, Illinois. It was just called The Times. And one of my favorite professors that I only had for one class when I was at Eastern, and it was the worst class. But if he hadn't have been the professor, I don't know if I would have got through that class, because from everything I heard about that class, it was the hardest class in
communication
in journalism program. Yeah, communication law. It was the hardest class in that.
The happiest D I ever got in college.
Yeah, like it was the hardest class in that realm, right?
Yeah, in that major.
And the guy who taught that class, and I'm not happy about it, but the guy had passed right before I was about to take the class. Rest in peace. But John Ryan, he is the one who helped me get this internship at the Times. And all I did was, and I didn't even know the guy, because when I went to do it, or when I went to talk to him about it, it wasn't like I went to talk to him. I talked to someone who then pointed me to him. And like, I had never even had a class with the guy. And he had some contacts, and he contacted someone there. And next thing I know, I have a summer internship after my junior year of college. And I just happened to live like 20 miles south from Ottawa, Illinois at the time. And like, so I went and worked. I was an intern at the Times, and I won't lie, I didn't do anything insane. I got there at the time. Brandon Marshall was with the Bears, and he did some charity event where they rode Harley Davidson motorcycles from Naperville all the way down to Ottawa, and they met at the Harley Davidson shop there, and they did some event there or whatever. And that was probably the coolest thing I got to do there. But I met people, and like there's people that I'm still friends with on Facebook from that job, and there's people that I met within the community, which was cool. It was the first real like media job that I had that I actually took serious, and that I was like, this could really help me get somewhere.
Internships are huge in media. I mean, internships are huge in a lot of different jobs. And I mean, we're talking about that. My first internship was at a radio station in my hometown too. And now, luckily, a lot of stations are paying their interns. Mine was unpaid. I don't know.
I got lucky. Yeah, I got lucky and got paid. Yeah.
Mine was not paid, but I also know the privilege that I have. I was able to live at home. I mean, radio and media in general is still a predominantly white business, and a lot of that is because people that can get the internships usually are white because they just live. They're in more affluent places. I didn't live in an affluent place, but I was also very lucky to be able to move home for a summer, live and work for my dad for a summer, and also have this internship. And I would not have been able to get where I am now without those connections within my own family, just my own family. And
Right.
I'm lucky that way. There's some people that don't have that luck, don't have the connections to get to the people in the industry themselves that are super, super talented that go by the wayside. And that's why I like stuff like what we're using today, how we're doing these podcasts, that those people now have a voice. They have a way to connect to people. And go support your small podcasts, go support your small businesses, go support those people that your friends of color that maybe don't have a way to get out to the major media markets, but are still just as good as everybody else that's on TV.
Yeah. So anyway, I did that.
That's my soapbox.
I can see that. And came back, did my senior year. And to be honest, I remember trying to be, I think I applied to be the sports editor at the Den, Daily Eastern News. And I wouldn't say that I was bummed that I didn't get it, but I also wasn't surprised because I just didn't hang around the Daily Eastern News every day and basically become best friends with any of the people there. There was one guy there that I kind of talk to on Cubs Twitter a lot now, Aldo Soto. He works at Sports Mockery. He's like a Cubs blogger or something like that. But I mean, he was there, but I wasn't even really close with him in college. But
he went to Eastern. That's good to know.
Yeah, he went to Eastern. And so yeah, that was kind of like my thing in college is I feel like I didn't do enough. But the internship was great to put on my resume. And so now, Steve, you did a couple jobs and you were able to get where you're at now, and you've been there for a while, and that's awesome. Mine is so out of the box. I can't believe that I have the job I have now because of everything that I went through beforehand. Because I graduated college, I moved home for 2 weeks, and I hated every second of it because I hated.
Once you move out, it's so hard to go back.
Once I moved out, I couldn't do it anymore. So all right, I moved out, and I took the first job that I was offered, and it was the biggest mistake of my career.
You hated that job.
I hated it. I got hired as a general assignment reporter in Watseka, Illinois. If you don't know where that is,
that's like the job I was thinking of. There's the one after your newspaper job that you took too.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a lot of jobs before I got this job at CHGO that I really hated. All right.
Everyone's got the stories of the jobs they hated before they got the job they love.
So I took this journal assignment reporting job, and Watseka, Illinois is just south of Kankakee. It's in the middle of nowhere. Apparently, it's like the flood capital of the world because while I lived there, it flooded there from rain multiple times. It's a nice little small town, whatever. It's basically in the middle between Champaign and I don't know. Joliet.
I drive by it when I'm going home sometimes.
So I did that. I did that for 5 months. 5 months. Shout out to my friend Ryan Stanball. He got hired as a sports editor there. I got hired as a journal assignment reporter. He was the only friend I made there. He lives in Indy now. But we were both right out of college, and we just we're just trying to build our resume to get to the next job. We knew that we weren't going to be there forever. And I made it 5 months. I was hoping I could make it a year. I made it 5 months. And the first job I got offered doing sports, I took it, and it was in Peoria. So I took that job at the end of 2015. And the reason that I even saw it was Joe Gasandi, who is a professor at Eastern still, I believe.
Yes.
I think I saw him tweet it. I think I saw him tweet that they were hiring at the Daily Pekin Times, which is at the time, I don't know if it still is, but at the time they were just a branch of Gatehouse Media under the Journal Star, the Peoria Journal Star.
I think they still are.
All these other weeklies that are from Washington, Illinois, Morton, Illinois.
Yeah, they are.
East Peoria. Daily, the Pekin Times was the only daily outside of the Peoria Journal Star. And they needed like they called it the assistant sports editor. And so I got hired and I was like ecstatic. I remember being super excited. I was like, finally, something in the industry. Like I'm in the industry and it's in sports. I don't have to pretend that I give a shit what's going on at these stupid county board meetings, Steve. I was so excited. I was so excited, man. I was so excited. I was like, I don't care that I'm going to go watch a bunch of teenagers dribble basketballs or sling pigskins and report on it. It's at least in sports. And I was like, this is the beginning. This is the beginning.
I have a story about you covering city. Every journalist should cover city council meetings, and one of the like rites of passages here at WILL is chief stories. I know the chief is a sore subject for a lot of Illini fans. I tell them, get over it. Sorry, but it's always one of the, and I'm actually not sorry. Every new reporter we get has to do some form of the chief story, and it's the same story every single time. But it's a rite of passage. Like it's going to cover that Tuesday night board meeting. It's going to cover that Wednesday night city council meeting that goes 3 hours because no one knows how to shut up. But yes, those are those like rite of passage things that every journalist does.
Oh my, they were so awful when I worked at that previous job. So anyway, I get this job, assistant sports editor. I was there for almost a year. And so that was in 2016. And so I was reporting on high school sports. I did volleyball, basketball, baseball, all of it, basically. Even did some football, obviously, in the fall. And then you kind of talked about it, how like there isn't a lot of money in the industry, especially in the smaller markets. Not a lot of money, right?
Especially I'm making newspapers.
Yeah. Even in 2016, like newspapers are starting to just kind of trend. You know what I mean? I mean, it was already trending down, but I was making like $11 an hour. I was making like $11 an hour, and we had 2 people on the sports staff. People
covering a high school that has 9 sports.
Well, not only Pekin, but like the surrounding area, because like we had to do these weeklies. We had to do the weeklies for Morton, East Peoria, Washington, and I think Canton was one of them. I think, and then
those aren't close. They aren't close together. It's not like going to like, oh, I'm going to go to Pilsen and then go to another neighborhood in Chicago. No, it's driving 30 miles.
Yes, exactly. We had to do that and all these like small schools, because like all of the small schools, like 1A, 2A schools would read the Daily Pekin Times because they were the main one. And like the Peoria Journal-Star would cover more on like what's going on in Peoria, and then like Morton, Washington, East Peoria, and like Dunlap, and like all these bigger towns, right? So that surrounded Peoria.
Yeah, all the towns that aren't Peoria.
Yeah. But they wouldn't do like the really small ones. We're talking like really small, like we're like maybe 1,000, 2,000 people, right? Ooh. So like 2 people on the staff. Schools. Yes. Two guys on the sports staff to cover all these schools and all their sports. It was impossible, man. It was absolutely possible. I was so burnt out because not only was I not making any money, there was just not enough time, right? And so I didn't want to leave there, but I started looking to try and find like a part-time job to make more money, but in the industry. So I started applying to like radio groups in Peoria because I lived in East Peoria. So like it would have been like on the way if I had, got a job at one of the radio stations in Peoria, and then would have to go to Pekin later to do my current job. So I got hired at Advanced Media Partners. I don't know if they still exist in Peoria or not. I think they do. And I got hired as a promotions assistant. So the bottom of the barrel. I didn't have benefits.
Promotions assistant is the polite way of saying you're the bitch.
Yes, basically. And I really wasn't trying to leave where I was. I told my sports editor, I was like, dude, like I got to make more money somehow. Like I got to if I have to go part-time here and then do that job part-time too, or do this job 30 hours a week and do that job, 15 to 20. Like, I'm going to figure it out some way, somehow. Well, and mind you, at the time, they had been searching for a news reporter for like 8 months, and they didn't find anyone. I tell this guy, and I'm going to reveal his name here in a second, that I'm going to do this. And next thing I know, I'm doing this job part-time for about a month. And like one of his good friends who works at WEEK he decided to hire him to be like the assistant sports editor and do the job full-time. So then I was basically forced out. And I didn't make a big deal about it, but it was something that really pissed me off because he knew that they were taking their time to try and find someone to replace the news reporter. So I thought they were going to do the same thing with my position. And to this day, I have kind of held a grudge against that guy. And it's not that I don't like the guy. It's not that I don't think the guy is good at his job. He just kind of did me dirty, in my opinion. And I didn't really understand why. And to this day, he is probably the fakest person that I've met in the industry. To this day. And he works at Illini Inquirer now, Steve. Again, he's super talented, and he has a drive and a passion for the industry and is really good at his job. But with how that was handled, in my opinion, from my outlook, it was something that just really discouraged me, not only with my career, but also with just being able to trust anyone within the industry, because he knew that I was struggling financially and that I needed to make more money. And he did everything he could to find someone to replace me as fast as he could after talking to me about it. And then, this is to the side, but I think one of his family members died, and like he had to like go to a funeral or whatever. And like, this was right after like he found this replacement. And like, I think it was like my first or second to last day. And he asked me if I could like work a couple more days. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that after like everything that had blown up. Right. And so I felt bad about it because he had to, like, someone died in his family and he had to like do that and deal with that. But it was like, this is what happens whenever you do me dirty like this. Anyway, his name's Joey Wagner. He's, again, do not go DM him on Twitter and tell him he's an awful person or anything like that. But it's something like, there was something that happened to me in the industry that like I didn't forget. And to this day, I still haven't forgot. And the reason I say he's one of the fakest people I've ever met while working in the industry is because at work, he would be super nice to me, this and that. And like, I felt like we were a good team, but then when we weren't at work, I felt like he was talking trash about me behind my back, multiple times. And it's not that, and the reason that it bothers me is because he didn't try to like just talk to me about what was bothering him. I mean, I was a year out of college. It's not like I was perfect at the job. Right. You know what I mean? And he was barely out of college. He had only been out of,
he's my age, I think. He might not. No, he's younger than me.
No, yeah,
he might be the same age as you.
He's definitely either my age or a year or two older. Like,
anyway,
he would just, the way he would act in front of me was completely different than what I felt like he was saying to people that I worked with behind my back. And like, listen, we all talk shit about people we work with at our jobs, but like, don't make it so obvious, man. Like, it was one of those things. And like, again, I'm not here to say that he was an awful person. He's not an awful person, but it was just something that I hope I hope that he's gotten better with. And he clearly he's great at the job because he now works at Illini Inquirer, and that's like one of the biggest Illini media networks in Champaign.
Yeah, they're definitely, as someone that works and lives in Champaign, they're definitely the Illini media in general is not exactly the most critical media. Like most most people that cover college sports, they're not exactly critical. When Shannon Ryan left to go cover be the women's basketball editor for The Athletic, the criticism went down significantly. Shannon did a great. She's a great reporter. You want to know stuff about women's basketball? Go read Shannon Ryan stuff at The Athletic. She's great. But when she left the Illini beat from the Tribune, the criticism really went down. I have a friend that really thinks that the same thing, and I definitely agree with him. The criticism of the Illini went down. I'm sure there's some things that have gone on that most other people don't know because, like every college, there's things that go on that a coach or an athletic director can make go away. I mean, the stories come out at every college across the country. Alabama, it happens all the time. Tennessee, it happens all the time. Georgia, it happens all the time. Just today, Mickey Joseph got arrested for interim head coach at Nebraska, got arrested today for a domestic assault. Or it was, I think is what it was. I don't remember off the top of my head. I just saw he was trending on Twitter. Clicked it. It was a mugshot. He got arrested for something. And like that. But no one knew that until just now today. Everyone was wondering, he's like, why didn't he get the job at Nebraska? That might be it. But anyway, there's a lot of media in general is a business that you kind of have to be you don't kind of have to, you have to be cutthroat. You have to be willing to make those sacrifices.
Right. So anyway, like, again, I'm not sitting here trashing him as a person. It was just something that happened at the beginning of my career that, like, I still remember and I haven't forgot. And it's, in a way, it reminds me that I can't just assume that every person that I'm going to run into within the industry is a good person. But it goes into the next part, right? So I basically lose that job, and I'm working part-time with no benefits at a radio station, making like $9 an hour, Steve. Like,
that sounds about right.
And I live in Peoria, and it's 2016, and
you cannot live on $9 an hour in Peoria.
Yeah,
I know that.
2016 going into 2017, and like thankfully at the time, like, my mom and my dad were in a good spot. And my mom helped me pay for my student loans, and I had some money saved up, and I had a couple of roommates. So my rent wasn't necessarily super crazy. Anyway, I was able to just skate by I think I did that for about 6-7 months. And the experience I got out of that job was they had an ESPN affiliate. So I got to work the soundboard. I got to work with Jim Matson, who is probably a legend in Peoria.
He is.
He not even probably he is a legend in Peoria. He also is a U of I alum. Yep. And I got to really experience working in like a sports station type scenery. And while doing that while being a promotions assistant, doing all the bitch work basically. And one of the reasons that I was able to, I guess, skate by for a while is like I went to that radio group and I did literally everything that they asked me to do. There was one woman there, I forgot her name. I wish I remember. She tried to get me fired because she didn't like the way that I did something at some event. And she totally misunderstood the entire situation. I had to end. And the thing is that woman, when she tried to get me fired, she had put her 2 weeks in, like a week and a half before that. A week and a half. She had like 2 days left.
She's not 1 foot out the door. She's like a foot and a half out the door.
She tried to get me fired, and she was trying to leave. It was one of the dumbest like things I'd gone through in my entire life. I remember coming home and venting to Kyle and Andrew. I think a few other people that we went to college with came to visit that weekend. It was one of the dumbest things. But anyway. I skated around. I made some good experience and was able to add it to my resume. But it happened. What happened next is what happens to a lot of people in this industry. They got burnt out and they gave up on having a job and a career in this. And that's basically what happened to me, man. Like I started applying for like social media jobs, marketing jobs. I did apply for the News Gazette. They had a sports writing position open at the News Gazette in Champaign. And I thought, okay, well, they're very well respected. They're bigger. They're probably going to be able to pay me a living wage at least. And the thing was I got offered a job basically running the social media department of this environmental services company. I got offered the job earlier than what the News Gazette had offered. And I went back and forth with them and was like, hey, I got offered this job and they're only waiting for like another couple of days. Like, have you guys came down to a decision on who you're going to hire? And they're like, we haven't, but we're probably leaning towards these other two guys. So please go take the other job. So I was kind of bummed, but I was also like,
you got to respect them for doing that though. Cause there are some people or some companies that will just string you along the entire way.
Right. So shout out to, I think his name is Matt Daniels. He's a sports editor at the News Gazette.
Not anymore.
Not anymore? Do you know where he's at?
I don't know who the sports editor at the News Gazette is currently.
Well, at the time it was Matt Daniels. I believe that's what his name was. And so, like I'm out of the industry, man. Like from, the second half of 2017 until 2020, right? So 2017, rest of 2017, I'm working at it's an environmental services company. What happened was this company, they're ran by a bunch of old people who didn't know how to use the internet. And they're like, can you get us more
use the internet for us?
Yeah. Can you get more engagement on Facebook? Can you get some engagement here and here? Fix our LinkedIn account. And they were like, go fix it. And I was like, all right. It was like they handed the keys to the car and said, fix it. And I was like, okay. And all I really did was just posted more on their Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn accounts and was just like highlighting
sometimes
sales and
just that easy.
Like that. Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know how well those accounts are doing now for them, but like, that's basically what I did, was just do things that engaged more people. That's all I did. And so at the time, like during that, like the only thing I didn't like about that job was the fact that it was just in an industry that I could give two shits about. I didn't understand it. That's what kind of made the job hard at first. And it honestly kind of put me in a position where I was thinking, like, what did I do? Like, I could have just stayed at that radio station. And even though the job sucked, at least I liked it. And the only thing that I really liked about the job was that I liked the people I worked with. My boss, she was incredible. She is someone I still talk to. And like, overall, the experience was great. And it was in Ottawa where I had, had that job at the time. So I was familiar with the area and like, it was great. I did that for 2 years. Right. And then me and Cassidy started dating. We were long distance for a year. And during that process, when we decided we were going to move in together, I had to shout out to you. You're half the help. But so with that, you had to figure out where we're going to live together. Right. And it was either she was going to move to Ottawa or I was going to move to somewhere in Chicagoland. Right. And I think I applied for so many jobs similar to what I was already doing, something in social media, something in marketing, and ended up getting this job at Camping World headquarters, which is in Lincolnshire, which is like a north suburb.
I thought it was Dick's. I forgot it was Camping World.
No, it's Camping World. It's in like an RVD retailer or whatever. And basically what I was doing there was they called it a social care agent, but they advertised it as like a social media coordinator. And what I did what I did basically was just reply to people on Facebook that were pissed off, and I basically transfer them to whoever the hell was going to fix them or fix their issue, whatever. I was basically a line of help. I was a help desk. I was doing customer service. I was doing nothing related to social media. But I don't regret taking the job because it allowed me and Cassidy to move in together. And to be honest, I wanted to live in Chicagoland. I knew like if I could get a job in that industry in Chicagoland, I was probably going to be happy at some point. So I wasn't too upset that I took the job, even after 4 months of working there. And then the pandemic happened. Before the pandemic happened, I missed doing like sports because I did that job for 2 years and all this. So I started the Sky's Falling podcast, which if you're listening to us on the same feed, you can go listen back to episode 1 and you can hear how bad I sound then compared to how I sound now. And, the whole process, the whole idea thinking of that podcast, of starting that podcast, was that I just wanted an outlet to talk about sports. I did not think it was going to get me anywhere. It was just something that was like, okay, my job is okay. It's not the greatest job in the world, but it pays. But I'm going to do this because who knows? It could turn into something. People are doing it all the time these days and whatever. And so me and Tommy started beginning of 2020. The absolute worst time to start a podcast if you look back at it in hindsight.
Because everyone else was starting a podcast at the same exact time.
Well, I guess that, and then also the pandemic came and sports were canceled,
that
right?
whole thing.
Right? So, the pandemic came, and I lost my job at Camping World. And there's a whole story behind that. Basically, the short story is I was told that no one was losing their job via email, and then they ended up laying me and a handful of other people off. There's a shitty company. Marcus Lemonis is an absolute fraud. There's billboards of him on his stupid TV show that's on HGTV here in Chicago, and I flip it off every time I see them. He blocked me on Twitter because he tweeted a video of him at a Cubs game and said he was giving away 4 free tickets or something like that to a game, and to reply something, and why they should get the tickets. And then I quote tweeted him and said, I should get the tickets because your ass fired me after you told me that you weren't going to. And then he blocked me. So that's the short story of that. There's so much more to it. And it's actually really funny when I think about it now. But during the process, I lost my job, and so I'm unemployed. The pandemic's happening. The world around us is just burning because everything is awful. And next thing I know, I'm on my Twitter feed one day, and I see this tweet from this Cubs account that I follow. I don't even remember why I followed it, but it was a Cubs account, and I'm a Cubs fan. So, and it was Cubs on Tap. It was a part of the On Tap Sportsnet network.
Great guys.
Great dudes. Still friends with a lot of them. The president, Tony Marchese, actually texted me after I announced that we were going to do this podcast and said, hey, I hope it goes well for you. It sounds like a really cool idea. So shout out to him. And so I used to write for like the fan-sided Cubs website when I was like at my other job at the environmental services company. And it was very half-assed. I didn't care. One, because the people that were in it were just people trying to move to the next thing, right? Like no one actually cared about the website. The first thing that I really noticed about On Tap was that the guys actually cared about the website, and like they wanted to grow it into something great. Like no one was getting paid. No one, like they just cared about, drinking beer and talking sports and like just having a good time. That was like their full on brand. And I was like, well, that's cool. Like I like those 3 things. You know what I mean?
I like that.
Right.
I like beer and sports. Beer and sports are fun.
So like I applied, and next thing I know, I'm getting a professional email and all this stuff, and it seems cool, right? So I joined, and we're going through the pandemic, and I'm writing sparingly, but I'm like in the Slack channel, and I can see that people really care about the website, and I'm also doing this podcast, the Sky's Falling, on the side with Tommy as well, and so I'm doing that podcast. I'm writing about the Cubs on Tap. And, I'm back in sports, but I'm not getting paid jack shit for doing it. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I ain't like, the only reason I'm making money is because I got unemployment and I'm driving around delivering food with the Grubhub app, which made me a lot of money because everyone was at home and people felt bad for all the essential workers. So shout out to everyone who felt bad. Thank you for your tips. So like that's how I was making money, but I was just doing the sports stuff with On Tap and like the podcast on the side. And when I first started Sky's Falling, that's how I met Kevin Kaduk, who is the head of content of CHGO, and he was like the second guest that we had, and he had started Midway Minute around the same time. And that's why we had him on, because my thinking was, okay, if we get him on the podcast, he'll spread our podcast, and hopefully we get some new listeners. And we're doing him a favor by promoting his newsletter, right? And what turned into just like something small like that turned into like we had Kevin on a couple more times, and like we DM'd a few times, and like he's super like he became like we called him like the dad of our podcast, like because he's a dad, right? And so it just created a relationship with him. And yeah, so then, I finally get a job in December 2020 at SAE, Sigma Alpha Epsilon's national headquarters in Evanston, as a communication coordinator. And honestly, when I got the job, I was like, this is the one. This is the job that I'm probably going to be at for at least 5 years. And I take this job and I'm still doing stuff with On Tap on the side for free. And I'm doing Skies Falling because it's like once or twice a week. I'm basically doing like 3 jobs, 1 that pays me and 2 that don't pay me. And then I worked at SAE from December 2020 to March of this year. And through that time working at SAE, I helped build their social media, I guess, engagement and just experience. That was the thing. That was a similar reason that they hired me. They wanted someone to do the social media, basically. I worked with a guy by the name of Dave Pascarella, who is, I would consider, a very good friend of mine now. I worked with him and another guy named Johnny Sal. And, I was the social media guy and Dave was like he did all the other crap. And then Johnny was the guy who dealt with all the bad shit that's related to Greek life. Unfortunately, it's unfortunate to say, but that's basically what it was. But I got to, the job was awesome because I met a bunch of other SAEs that were from around the country. And I got to, I guess, kind of relive glory days of college, except I didn't. I don't know. But like, it was very cool to work at the Temple in Evanston while also doing all that other crap. And so, thankfully, I kept doing all that other crap because in March, Kevin sends me a DM and he tells me, hey, got this cool opportunity. Want to see if you'd be interested. And I just happened to be working from home that day. And I'm like, all right, well, it's 3 p.m. on a Friday. I'm going to stop working and do this call. So he calls me and he tells me about CHGO and what they want it to be. And I straight up couldn't believe him. I was like, you're pranking me, man. Like, there's no way. I mean, there's no way.
I remember you sent me a text about it.
Yeah. I sent you and like 30 other people a text related. Probably, honestly, I copied and pasted it and sent it to like 30 people. I was like, there's no way. I was so mind blown. But whenever I got offered the job, like, I texted so many people about it. It was the first job that I ever did something like that because I was so excited. Because I worked so hard making no money to get something like this. And I'm never going to be able to repay Kevin back for that. And I feel like he wouldn't say that. I feel like he wouldn't say that, like, I owe him anything. Like, he just knew that he was finding talent. And I'm not saying that I wasn't deserving of it. But like we said throughout this podcast, it's very competitive. And there's so many other people. And the fact that Kevin came to me, of all the people that he could have gone to this day, still blows my mind. Like, it's something that I'm truly grateful for. And I will never forget that happened that day and like how this has panned out. And like, look, CHGO All City Network it's growing, man. Like,
I mean, there's people that it's a startup. Startups are hard, man. And so it's a big risk. I remember that was one thing you were saying is, it's kind of asking for advice a little bit, but not really asking for advice because I knew you were going to do it from the first time you said something. Was like, I mean, it's a risk. It's always a risk to join a startup, but CHGO and All City, I mean, I have zero connection to All City or CHGO other than my friend Cody here. But this is my ringing endorsement is they've been successful in 2 other cities. Chicago is definitely the biggest city they've been in. And they've kicked off great. Their Bears coverage is great. Their White Sox coverage is great. Those are the 2 that I really listen to a lot of.
I wouldn't expect you to listen to the Cubs podcast.
I mean,
it's okay.
I've tuned in a little bit just because Luke Stuckmeyer is called Steve. And I was like, why is Luke Stuckmeyer called Steve sometimes? And I was very confused. And when you guys joined, there was a crossover podcast at one point in time. And that's where her turn in was like, why is my friend Cody talking to Herb Lawrence, who I've listened to for years on The Score, and Sean Anderson, who I recently started listening to a lot more. I'm like, what the hell? And like Sean and I interact a couple times on Twitter. Herb will like a couple of my Illini tweets, ILL. But other than that, I'm like, what is our lives? So I think about it sometimes because like,
yeah,
what are we doing? Like you're out there talking to Io DeSumo every Wednesday or whatever it is. And like the governor has been on shows that I've board opt, or like President Obama was at U of I and I board opt President Obama talking to the University of Illinois. Like, what was that, 3 years ago or whatever? It was pre-pandemic. So, but it's crazy to think of. And we've rambled now for an hour and 15 minutes.
Right. We said this was going to be an hour and it's been an hour and 15. So,
and you did tease something earlier though.
Yeah. So and we're going to talk about it. Let's do it. But before we do it, I just want to say that like everything that we've said, from how hard it is to get in this industry or have success in this industry, I feel like we are great. Like we are both great examples and great like inspiration for people. Like if you're listening to this and you are in college or you are, someone who like feels like I did when I felt like I was done. You know what I mean? Like, do not give up. Do your own thing. Like, I feel like that's the thing people should do now is just do their own thing, because these giant media conglomerates, they don't give a shit about you, man. Like when you read about all the layoffs that ESPN is doing, man, like it's because they just don't want to pay their best talent and they want to bring in the new stuff.
Even today at NPR, they have to budget cut $10 million. Like NPR. Yes, NPR is partially funded by the government. It's when people are like, we need to defund NPR, it's like, it's literally 5% of NPR's operating budget is from taxes. So that people are like, oh, defund NPR is like, that does nothing. Go ahead, fine, whatever. But still, I don't want to get into it. But still, like $10 million from NPR is not cheap.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Right.
It's a lot of money for any company.
Right. So I guess basically to end that part is, just keep grinding, man. Like that's what I did. Like, I took a 2-year break just because I had given up, but then I just found myself back in it, and it took the country turning on fire for me to do that in a way. Basically.
If it's something that you want to do, the draw will always be there. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
It's hard. It's a hard drug to break, being in media, and it's not just sports too. Like I don't do a whole lot of sports anymore, but it's hard to break.
Okay. So we teased at the beginning. We're an hour and 15 minutes in. Let's do a hard we're an hour and 17 minutes in. Let's do a hard 10 minutes on this at most, Steve.
Oh, that's easy. That's easy.
The big news, and it's been out there for like a week now, week and a half, is that my good friend David Kaplan is leaving NBC Sports Chicago. And I don't like, he's not my best friend.
I understand.
But I like to say
friend of the show.
He's a friend of CHGO Cubs. And I did go to the obvious shirt store, I don't know, like 3 or 4 months ago. And he just happened to be there. And he recognized me, even though like I didn't expect him to recognize me, even though he came on my podcast. But he is who he is. And that's why, to me, it's kind of like mind-blowing that he still recognized me. Anyway, David Kaplan is leaving NBC Sports Chicago at the end of December, and I think it is a huge blow for the Chicago sports media scene.
I agree with you.
And just in pure terms of entertainment, because you don't have to agree with his takes, you don't have to agree with what he says, but
I find Cap to be annoying. Now, I don't know if that's because I'm a White Sox fan and he's a Cubs fan, and he is a die-hard Cubs fan. He is
absolutely,
and blatantly so, and like good for him. Like but he is. I don't know. I think our personalities wouldn't match. I don't think. I don't think we would necessarily like it. It'd be one of those guys where like, yeah, he's all right. But we wouldn't hang out. Me and Cap,
right?
Which is fine.
I don't even know if I would be able to hang out with Cap, but I will say that I think we have similar energy in terms of our on-air like personality,
right?
And that's the thing about him that I've always admired, because in college we're always told like you got to be right down the middle and this and that, and like then I remember when I was in college or post college, I remember him saying just bluntly that he is a homer for the Cubs, and like. And he was honest about it. And like, to me, I was like, then why do I have to be down the middle if he's not, and he's where he's at? And so like, I've always kept that mentality. And I wouldn't say on CHGO Cubs that I am a complete homer all the time. I definitely criticize the Cubs. And if they do not spend money on a freaking shortstop this offseason, I'm going to go off on Jed Hoyer and Tom Ricketts.
There's a difference between being a homer and being rosy all the time, and then being a homer because you care about the team. Like that's Cap. Cap cares about the Cubs. That's you too. It's one of those where you're a homer. Yes. Like you want the Cubs to win, but you're also not going to not criticize them because they're not winning.
Absolutely.
Like, I feel like every person that runs the Bears beat, except for maybe one or two, have been a Bears fan their whole entire life.
Mm-hmm.
They all want the Bears to win. Business is better when teams win. I don't understand when sports radio callers will be like, you just want the X team to lose because it's better if you're winning. It's like, no, it's not. I don't listen to sports radio when the White Sox are bad. I don't listen to sport. Like right now, I listen to 3 Bears podcasts.
Yeah.
2 Bears podcasts, really.
As someone who does a podcast where the team sucked all year, I guarantee you there were more people watching and listening to CHGO White Sox than there were CHGO Cubs.
And the White Sox also sucked. And this season for the White Sox was
but the difference is with the White Sox is that they had high expectations, and so people were angry. So people would come to the YouTube chat, or they would listen to Herb and Sean rant, and they
had some good ones too.
They would get that like that feeling like that. Yes, I'm with you. Like you, I agree with you. Like that. Like it was such a talked about thing when as the Cubs, it was like, okay, they might win 80 games if all these things go right, but more likely than not, they're probably going to win 65 games. They end up winning like 74. So like, what's the difference? So like, there's a difference in there. If there's expectations, people are going to call into their radio stations. People are going to leave comments in the YouTube chat and say, this team stinks. They should fire this guy and this guy and this guy. Right.
Fire everyone.
So yeah, that's like the only time when things are not going well, that is good for us, I guess you can say.
And one thing, going back to Cap, is one thing that he would do. He never held back, ever.
Right.
On his Unfiltered. I mean, he's literally had a show called Unfiltered, and I think he's still going to be at ESPN because he still has the morning show with Jay Hood.
At this point, he's still going to be at ESPN, and I think he's leaving NBC because he's going to do more with this YouTube channel.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. I'm not reporting
NBC, that. NBC Sports, they or NBC did a bunch of buyouts. So I'm surprised he's honestly the only one we've heard of. I mean, it's probably not the only one, but it's the only one we've heard about so far because he's on TV every day. You kind of got to let your audience know. And it's also the holiday season, so he probably had some time off in there anyway, already pre-done. So like, I mean, like you said earlier, it's a loss for Chicago media on television. I mean, he hosts the Bears after show for Bears season. It's not the post game show; it's the after show. There's an NFL thing for that with those guys, and I used to watch that all the time. That was the best post game show of the Bears in the city when Lawrence was on. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what NBC Sports Chicago does. They're in an interesting spot right now. The contracts are up soon, I think, too, with some of the teams, which is another thing. I mean, it's 50% owned by Jerry Reinsdorf when you don't want anything 50% owned by Jerry Reinsdorf.
Well, okay. So yeah, no, the reason I think it's such a big loss is mainly because I mean he is a major face, man. And if he is going into retirement, and like who knows if he's going to be at ESPN much longer, like it's a big loss for NBC because I'm not trying to put it out there, but a lot of people who used to be there now work with me.
Well, they don't have. I mean,
so like they just keep losing.
You can't name a face of NBC. Like all their faces are former athletes.
Gordon Whitmire has been a name in Chicago for a long time.
Chuck Garfine's on there a long time. He's been on the Sox stuff for a long time. I mean, Jason Goff's there now doing Bulls appearing posts, and he's great, but that's not his full-time job.
Right.
He's got a ton of stuff. He's hosted podcasts on The Ringer. Like that's really, really good. The Full Go is really good. But you've got guys that come in and out all the time. Like Layla Rahimi has been in and out of NBC 5, NBC Sports Chicago for years. Lawrence Holmes has been in and out of TV a long time. But again, Lawrence's full-time job is hosting a daily 4-hour radio show on 670 The Score.
Right.
Cap's full-time job was hosting a radio show. Like that's kind of, they did TV on the side, which is great for them. Like it's a great gig if you can get it. If you can do sports TV on the side, that's great. But yeah, it's a loss for sports in Chicago. I think it's a loss for Chicago sports nationally because Cap was the face, like you said, of Cubs talk on TV.
Right. Yeah, no, it's I'm interested to see what happens after this, but I was pretty shocked because the way that I've got to know Cap is he is just go.
Right.
Man.
He's not
like
stop. Maybe he's burnt out. Maybe he's burnt out, just needs a break. Which is fine. If he were to say, I need to slow it down, every single person that's ever worked with him is like, you're probably right.
Yeah. Yeah. And, being able to work with Luke Stuckmeyer, he's like very close with Cap. And like, Luke has talked to me about Cap in terms of like what it was like to work with him and like, just the type of person he is. And, like if he's just burnt out, then like, it's not a surprise to anyone. So, but I do want to say, he is, again, you don't have to like what he says. You don't have to like his takes, whatever, but he is a Chicago sports media legend. And, yeah, man, he's someone that was kind of an inspiration for me whenever, like, especially post college. Cause I would tune in, in college, I would tune into Sports Talk Live a lot.
Right.
But then, whether it was radio or whether it was the, Cubs post game, especially during the golden era, especially in 2016, like he was a part of my daily life,
right?
Post college, especially. So, yeah. Anyway, I am. We're done. It's 8:30. Okay,
hour and a half is a long time for a podcast.
Yeah. So to everyone who watched live tonight, shout out to you. I'm gonna put the link to subscribe on Twitter and in the comments here on Facebook and on YouTube. And I'll show you where you can listen to this if you're just now tuning in, and all that good stuff. Make sure to follow the Twitter account. It's just at @connections_pod. And I'm at Cody_CHGO and what is it, Steve?
At your boy Stove.
At your boy Stove, which has been your handle literally forever.
Since college.
Yeah, since college. So
I've built a brand that I can no longer get away from, which is fine. That's a different story. That's another story for another podcast.
Maybe we'll talk about it next week. Next week, Luke Stuckmeyer doesn't know that he's coming on next week, but I'm telling you all that Luke Stuckmeyer is coming on next week. Awesome. I can't wait to talk to him because he is a vibe. I'm going to leave it at that.
I'm excited. The best part about this is I don't know people in Chicago media at all, other than interacting with them a little bit on Twitter.
Yeah. You're about to meet some guys, Steve. So
I'm excited.
Fun.
I'm excited.
All right. So we'll be back next week. I don't know what day, but this is going to be a once a week thing. So just make sure you're following us on Twitter and to keep the updates and everything. And I'm looking forward to doing this the rest of the winter and the baseball off season, guys. So thanks again for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week.